from West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Support for the Legislature Today is provided by the following.
AARP West Virginia, your ally for real possibilities in the Mountain State. Online at aarp.org/WV. West Virginia Higher Education Policy Commission, working to double the degrees produced annually to meet workforce demands and grow West Virginia's economy. Learn more at wvhepc.edu. The W. Page Pitt School of Journalism and Mass Communications at Marshall University, providing hands-on education in advertising, public relations, and journalism across all media platforms.
At the legislature today, lawmakers on both sides of the rotunda explore tax credits for working families while they continue their budget hearings from state agencies. Senators approve a bill making it illegal to share illicit photos without consent, and the House and Senate Judiciary chairs join us to discuss the many bills that will come before their committees this year. Those stories and more coming up on the legislature today. Good evening, I'm Ashton Mara. Members of the Senate's Select Committee on Tax Reform will begin their work tomorrow on a bill to get rid of the state's personal income tax, replacing it with an increased consumer sales tax with fewer exemptions. Lawmakers on both sides of the rotunda are unsure if the proposal will make it through the legislative process, but until it does, two legislators are taking a shot at an income tax credit they say will help working families. Liz McCormick reports.
An Earned Income Tax Credit, or EITC, is an extra lump of cash refunded to a low-income working family every year at tax time. The amount a family receives varies, but it's based on a person's income and the amount of children in the home, but only working adults qualify. The credit is meant to help a struggling family get ahead, and many use the extra funds to make major purchases that may not be as easy for them to attain, like a car or a washer and dryer. West Virginians are currently eligible for a federal EITC, but the state doesn't offer its own. 26 other states and the District of Columbia offer EITCs, according to the National Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. Delegate Matthew Rohrback, a Republican from Cabell County, is pushing a state EITC in his chamber.
I think this is important for a number of reasons. First of all, it does encourage families to work, and we've got to get our workforce participation level up. But it's important to support these families as they do it. They need cars. They need to be able to buy gas. They need to be able to repair their cars. So it's all targeted to try to get more money into the hands of the vulnerable families, but to encourage them to work and to get out and participate in the economy. So it's really a win-win situation for everyone.
But with such a large budget gap to fill for fiscal year 2018, nearly $500 million, the credit would only increase the budget gap, costing the state between $60 and $80 million, according to most estimates. Still, to balance the upcoming budget, Governor Jim Justice has proposed almost $30 million in cuts and $450 million in tax increases, which will directly impact state workers. It's for this reason Rohrback says creating a state EITC is imperative.
If those taxes do get increased as he sees, I would hope that we would realize a lot of the taxes he's proposed are consumption taxes that will hit the people at the bottom levels of our economy the hardest. So this is really just an attempt to keep those vulnerable families at least even.
Across the rotunda in the Senate, Democratic Senator Ron Miller of Greenbrier County plans to introduce a similar bill to his chamber. Miller says he introduced an EITC bill last year, but it fell through the cracks. He hopes this year his colleagues will consider it, whether it's his or Rohrback's version.
There seems to be a desire to get EITC passed, but we want to make sure, we have a low workforce participation, and this seems to encourage that, help that.
Delegate Rohrback's bill has bipartisan support in his chamber. Miller is still speaking with senators to sign them up as sponsors. For the Legislature Today, I'm Liz McCormick at the State House.
A committee in the House is considering legislation to aid newly established small businesses. Samantha Godby has more.
House Bill 2375 would reduce some taxes for newly established businesses in West Virginia, and its sponsors say will empower local business owners and encourage more entrepreneurship. Nancy Reagan Foster is a member of the House Committee on Small Business, Entrepreneurship, and Economic Development, which looked at the bill today.
I'm a small business owner, and there's a huge risk that's involved in it, but we need to spark that entrepreneurship because those small business and medium-sized businesses are the ones that will employ a ton of people.
In the bill's current form, businesses employing no more than 250 people will be eligible for tax credits in their first 5 years of operation.
I think this bill has a great potential to encourage those to take that risk and start their business. I think once it's cleaned up, I think it would be a great bill.
The committee did not complete its consideration of the bill today and will revisit it on March 2nd. For the Legislature Today, I'm Samantha Godby in the House.
Since the start of this legislative session, members of both the House and Senate Finance Committees have been digging into the budget line items that tell each state agency how much money they have to spend. Just as it does each year, that process begins with agency presentations to those committees. But in the Senate, members are handling the budget process a little bit different this year, which was evident today in the budget presentation of the Department of Military Affairs and Public Safety. DMAPS, the shorthand for the Department of Military Affairs and Public Safety, is an area of the budget that Senate Finance Chair Mike Hall says can be difficult to cut. At $350 million, it's a fairly sizable part of state government and houses the regional jails, prisons, Homeland Security Office, state police, and a few other divisions. During the department's budget presentation today, Governor Jim Justice's newly appointed secretary, Jeff Sandy, told senators he's only officially been in his position for just over a month, but he's already looking to make changes.
It did not take me very long to realize some of the issues within DMAPS, and that is duplication of efforts.
Sandy says the agency is already combining some services, including financial and legal, to share personnel across agencies within the department. Each of those agency heads presented their individual line items to senators today, and even in a tight budget year, several asked for increases in their funding. Jan Cahill is the new superintendent of the state police. He told lawmakers that with the restoration of a previous $1 million cut, he planned to hire more technicians to help reduce the backlog in the state police's forensic lab. But he chose the new lab personnel over paying for a new state police cadet class because of the lack of funds. Several members of the committee didn't like the either-or choice in the state police line item, including Senator John Unger from Berkeley County, who says the drug epidemic is especially difficult in his district.
I know drugs has been a problem, but not to the epic level that it is today. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. Just about everything. It is absolutely no exaggeration at all for us to say that 90+%, probably 95% of everything we do has a drug link. If you connect the dots enough, you can go back and have a drug link on just about everything we do.
Senator Doug Facemeyer agreed. With the increased problems and influx of drugs are causing in the state, he told his fellow committee members continuing to make cuts is not the best option.
We cannot continue this. I mean, we are being penny wise and dollar stupid here. You know, not giving them a class in the overall picture. Forget about the general safety, but the drug problem. I mean, 95%, and I know that's a round number, but what if it's 75%? 75%, so what that means is the crimes and other things that aren't drug related, you don't have time to fool with them.
Lots of times.
And I mean, we owe our citizens better than this.
Senate Finance Chair Mike Hall recognizes that the legislature will have to make tough budgetary decisions this session, and so far, legislative leaders in both chambers say those decisions will come in the form of cuts. But Hall is working hard to make sure his committee understands the real-world outcomes of those reductions.
If you're going to talk about reducing the size of government, that you actually look at government in total to decide where you want to go, or decide maybe that it's pretty hard to do.
That's why Hall has divided his committee into work groups who are looking at each section of the budget before the agencies present their funding plans. That knowledge allows his fellow senators to ask more pointed questions of the departments, but also get them through the budget process more quickly. Hall says this session he wants to have a spending plan prepared as close to the halfway mark as possible.
We've only got 60 days, so we have to build at least some baseline understanding of the expenditures. Then, in the second part of this session or whatever, decide if revenue is going to be there or not be there, what to do next.
And that new revenue isn't necessarily off the table, according to Hall, despite leadership's push to cut instead of increase taxes. To Hall, it's about protecting necessary public services, and he believes his fellow senators are starting to come to the same understanding.
I'm hearing members say things like, if I can become convinced that, there's not much waste or we really need to do these things, then they would look at revenue measures.
Hall says the DMAP's budget hearing today was a good example of where cutting government could jeopardize the services West Virginians rely on. He says increasing the state police funding to pay for additional employees both in the forensic lab and in cruisers on West Virginia streets would be ideal, but those dollars don't currently exist. Senators approved a bill today that creates a new crime in the state that's come about with the advent of technology. Beth Voorhees explains.
Senate Bill 240 would make it illegal in the state to share a personal, private image of another person without his or her consent. The bill was drafted by students at Bethany College and finessed in the Senate's Judiciary Committee, creating the misdemeanor offense. Senate Judiciary Chairman Charles Trump explained on the floor today, anyone who intentionally shares an explicit photo of a person who had a reasonable expectation that the image would remain private could face up to a year in prison and a $5,000 fine. A second offense is a felony, punishable with a 3-year prison term and a $10,000 fine. Trump called the need for the bill a statement of the times in terms of both technology and morality.
It is apparently not unheard of when a couple breaks up under circumstances that are unpleasant for one of them to get mad and blast out on the internet or on a cell phone or somehow private, intimate images. And so the students from Bethany who talked about us, I think it's shocking to some of us that this maybe is more common than we realize, but they convinced the committee that it was an issue that warrants some attention by the legislature and addressing. And so this bill is intended to do that.
The bill passed without any votes against it and now heads to the House of Delegates. For the Legislature Today, I'm Beth Voorhees in the Senate.
The legislature is full of new and returning faces this year. We meet more of them tonight in this edition of Meet Your Lawmakers.
Robert Plymel is a Democrat representing the state's 5th senatorial district. From Wayne County, Plymel was elected to the Senate in 1992. Senator Plymel is a graduate of Marshall University and has held leadership positions with the National Conference on State Legislatures and the Southern Regional Education Board. Jim Butler is a Republican from Mason County. He represents the state's 14th House of Delegates district. Delegate Butler was first elected in 2012. He is a U.S. Marine Corps veteran and serves as the Homeland Security Chairman of the House Committee on Veterans Affairs and Homeland Security. Jeff Foster was first elected to the House of Delegates in 2014. He is a Republican from Putnam County and represents the 15th House District. Delegate Foster is a graduate of the University of Kentucky and works for his family's construction supply business. He's the vice chairman of the Committee on Industry and Labor.
The budget continues to be the top priority this legislative session, but there are literally hundreds of other pieces of bills that will be introduced this year. And our guests tonight will likely see a good portion of them. Senator Charles Trump is from Morgan County. He chairs the Senate Judiciary Committee. His counterpart in the House is Delegate John Schott from Mercer County. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Good evening, Ashton.
Thank you for the invitation.
The budget is going to be the biggest bill this session. I think we can all agree on that one. But there are bills, most of the bills that impact the budget, they go to the Finance Committee. You guys get to see almost all of the other ones. The Judiciary Committee sees quite a few bills each session. There's one in the Senate, though, that does deal with the budget, and that changes some of the accounts that the legislature can appropriate without an individual piece of legislation. Senator Trump, this is your bill. Help us understand what this does.
I'll try. The legislation is designed to give the legislature authority to move money around, and particularly from special revenue accounts to general revenue accounts, more easily in the budget document. That's a cursory explanation.
So can you give us some examples? What kinds of accounts are out there that the legislature right now would have to approve an individual bill on?
It could be anything, Ashton. It's a great question. It could be anything under this bill that's not segregated according to the Constitution. Certain funds are required to be handled separately under the Constitution. But for years, for decades, the legislature has, former legislatures, sort of hidden money in nooks and crannies and passed general laws that said, we'll collect money from this or that activity, this fee, that tax, and dedicate the money to a specific thing in an effort to try to tie the hands of future legislatures, including this one. And so the purpose of this bill would be to sort of unlock the keys to those accounts so that in the budget bill, they could be moved to general revenue.
Oh, so we are talking specifically about lottery funds.
Lottery funds would be among those.
Okay. And this bill right now is in Senate rules, correct?
It is. It came out of the Senate Judiciary Committee last week. Chairman Hall of the Finance Committee wanted some time to look at it, and it didn't have an initial reference to the Finance Committee. So we agreed to sort of park it in rules to give him and his lawyers, the lawyers for that committee, an opportunity to look at it, examine it.
Okay. Chairman Schott, I won't ask you to talk about that bill because I know you haven't gotten to see it yet. It's still over in the Senate, but I do want to talk to you about an initiative that the House is really taking on, and that's substance abuse. You all have a select committee, it's a full committee this year to take on substance abuse, but those bills are then coming to you in Judiciary. What kinds of initiatives are you all seeing in your committee right now?
Well, we're going to see a number of bills intended to give law enforcement additional tools to deal with the drug crisis. And of course, as you know, it's sometimes hard to keep up with the creativity of the drug trade. And one of those bills that our committee will take up tomorrow is a fentanyl bill. I'm sure your viewers have seen the problems that's caused, especially in the Huntington area, with a massive overdose of, I think it was over almost 30 people in one day.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll be taking up a bill tomorrow to try to update the committee and update the laws on the use and trafficking of fentanyl. We've also created some bills to address the money laundering that goes on in connection with the drug trade. The conspiracy bill, which is intended to target the so-called drug kingpins. We'll deal with the transporting of drugs into the state and attempt to strengthen the laws that are already on the books on that. And then there's been some additional bills that are directed to the effects that this has on children, such as children that are in a home where a meth lab is and injuries they might sustain as a result of that, trying to target those type of situations and increase penalties and hopefully deter some of that.
Senator, the House seems to be taking the lead on those substance abuse bills, but I think they'll come to you eventually. How do you feel about things like increasing penalties for drug traffickers and making substances like fentanyl illegal?
I think there's going to be a great interest in the Senate in those sorts of bills that come from the House. It is true the House of Delegates is taking the lead on that, and we're looking forward to receiving for our consideration the excellent work product that is produced by Chairman Schott and his committee and the House of Delegates as a whole.
So, Delegate, if we can also talk about another bill that the House seems to have taken the lead on in the past couple years and keeps getting lost in the shuffle somewhere, and that's the human trafficking bill that you all put out. Was it today that got a final vote or yesterday?
Actually, it was the day before yesterday. We passed it unanimously, and it's the third effort for this bill to go through. We've had a human trafficking bill on the books for a good while, but there's been a flaw in it, and that required, in order to prosecute under that law, that you had to traffic more than one person. And so if a person was trafficking a single individual, there was no way a prosecutor prosecuted. So we corrected that in the bill 2 years ago. It went through the House and Senate both unanimously, went to the governor, but he vetoed it based on the fact we included a commission to deal with some of the problems and raise funds to provide services to the victims of human trafficking. And he was concerned about the lack of a funding source. So the second year it was out, it passed both houses, went to the Senate from the House again, and overwhelmingly passed both, but there were slightly different versions. And in the effort to reconcile the two, we just ran out of time. So we started early this year. It passed out of the House unanimously, and we hope the Senate, it's basically the version that we agreed to last year, so we're hopeful the Senate will see the bill and pass it quickly, and we can get it to the governor and hopefully get his signature on it.
Senator, there are another group of bills that seem to be coming from your committees that have to do with labor issues. Senate Bill 222 was passed in the Senate earlier this week that deals with unemployment benefits for workers who are on strike. And there's a bill that's been on second reading for days and days and days in the Senate, and has to do with the West Virginia Workplace Freedom Law. Can you explain to us why that bill kind of seems to be sitting on second reading, what the bill does and why it's there?
Well, the purpose of the bill is to clarify what the legislature intended in the enactment last year. And we believe that there might be some utility in that, because in a court case that's been filed here in Kanawha County.
And sorry, Senator, but we should say this is the right to work law that you all passed last year.
Absolutely right, the right to work law. In a court case here in Kanawha County, when I read the pleadings of the plaintiffs in that case, it was clear to me that they did not understand the full intent and import and purpose of the legislation. And so we've talked about whether or not we should act quickly to clarify it. And so we are in communication, Senate leadership and House leadership both, because there's litigation pending in the Circuit Court of Kanawha County. We want to be careful before we act and speak on that, but we're ready to do so. And I think this bill will be a good clarifying measure and perhaps helpful to the court and the court's consideration of the issues.
Gentlemen, we just have a few moments left, but I'm going to briefly ask you, if there's one priority for your committee this session, what would you say that priority is? Delegate?
Well, I think the drug issue and clearing up some of the confusion in some of the laws that now deal with that, and strengthening the tools that law enforcement has, and also filling in some gaps in the law so that law enforcement has the ability to try to curtail this horrible plague.
Senator, a priority for you.
You know, I concur in that. I give Chairman Schott credit. He's been a strong voice for those kinds of measures for a long time. Chairman Schott and I live geographically about as far apart from one another and still be in the state of West Virginia as you can. But the sad truth is that this scourge of drugs reaches every corner of our state. So over in the far eastern panhandle where I am, all the way down to Mercer County where Chairman Schott is, it's affecting people's lives.
Senator Trump and Delegate Schott, Chairman of the House and Senate Judiciary Committees, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We go now to the western part of the state where we meet 3 more lawmakers from Putnam, Mason, and Cabell counties.
Mike Hall represents the state's 4th senatorial district from Putnam County. A Republican, Hall was first elected to the Senate in 2006 after serving 5 terms in the House of Delegates. Senator Hall serves as chair of the Senate's Finance Committee and has previously served as the Senate's minority leader. Josh Higginbotham is a first-term delegate from Putnam County. He's a Republican representing the state's 13th House of Delegates district. Higginbotham is a student at the University of Charleston and a published author. At 20, Higginbotham is one of the youngest members of the House. Scott Brewer also represents the state's 13th House of Delegates district. He's a Democrat from Mason County. Brewer is a union carpenter and a first-time lawmaker.
Tomorrow on the Legislature Today, we wrap up the week with our roundtable discussion on the biggest issues facing lawmakers this session. Dr. Robert Rupp from West Virginia Wesleyan College and Dr. Mary Beth Beller from Marshall University join us. That's tomorrow. This has been the Legislature Today. I'm Ashton Mara. Thanks for joining us.
Support for the Legislature Today is provided by the following.
AARP West Virginia, your ally for real possibilities in the Mountain State. Online at aarp.org/WV. West Virginia Higher Education Policy Commission, working to double the degrees produced annually to meet workforce demands and grow West Virginia's economy. Learn more at wvhepc.edu. The W. Page Pitt School of Journalism and Mass Communications at Marshall University, providing hands-on education in advertising, public relations, and journalism across all media platforms. From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.